Today we're going to talk about Shanks, and this is a man who needs not much of an introduction. People know what he's about. They know that this man is insanely powerful and one of the strongest in the series. Some people even have him as the strongest in the show right now, alive. And we're going to talk a little about that because I do feel like there's some things that people might be missing or might not be ready to take into account just yet. Shanks is one of those characters that have been with us since the very beginning. He was introduced alongside Luffy since chapter 1, and he has had this presence unlike anybody else in the series. I mean, he introduced us to Conqueror's Haki, and then ever since then we've been wondering what are the secrets behind this insanely powerful and mysterious Haki. At one point it wasn't even clear whether it could be used offensively just like armament and observation. But now we know that Conqueror's Haki takes you to unimaginable heights in terms of power, and Shanks has represented that since the very beginning. Anytime anybody talks about Conqueror's Haki, they think of Shanks. He has arguably the best Conqueror's Haki feats in the series, and that's why people think he's the strongest right now, especially after last chapter, especially after what he did to Use's Kid. The way he dominated Kid and Killer in one attack is just, I'm not gonna say it's not something people didn't see coming, but the way Kid has been hyped up, it didn't feel real. It didn't feel like something that would actually happen, but it did. And although I feel like there's some context that needs to be added for Kid's side, I feel like Oda did want to go out of his way to just show us how monstrous Shanks is as a combatant. And the fact that he used Roger's attack, Divine Departure, I don't think that was without purpose. I think that was sending a message of some sorts from Oda. I'm gonna get into that a little bit later, but there are some other things I want to cover first. And there's the fact that initially, Shanks wasn't even supposed to lose his arm. The choice for Shanks to be one-armed was a decision suggested by one of Oda's editors to make the story more interesting. And he didn't lose just any arm, he lost his dominant sword arm. So over time, he had to adapt and use his other arm, which is his right arm. So for me, I felt like this held Shanks back in power. I felt like he didn't reach his true potential because he had one less arm and lost his dominant arm. It got to the point where I started asking myself, is Shanks even stronger than Rayleigh? Is he the weakest emperor? Is he even stronger than the likes of Akainu and Kuzan? Because I started to feel like this missing arm meant that much, that it will give him such a great disadvantage that he wouldn't be able to beat particular people at the top of the world. So naturally, I felt there was free reign to downplay Shanks. But after the recent arcs and recent chapters, I don't feel that way at all. I think Shanks has more potential than even some of his biggest fans realize. And a lot of this stems from Kaido's dialogue on Haki. He talks about devil fruits and says they alone are not enough to conquer the world. But you know what is? Haki. And this wasn't just a baseless claim. He used the great example that you can use, and that's the Pirate King Gold Roger. And Roger was a man without any fruit power. He was just a man with a sword in his Haki. To drive the point home even further, Kaido had one of the most powerful fruits in the series. He had a mythical Zoan, and yet he still chose to hype up Haki over everything. I feel like when it comes to the devil fruit versus Haki debates, I feel like devil fruits have better longevity, but Haki has a higher ceiling. Like, I feel like if someone is a devil fruit user, then they can maintain some sort of power on that level, even in old age, but then their Haki might go way down. But going back to Shanks again, there are some other reasons why I thought that he didn't need to be at a certain level for him to be, important to the story down the road, especially because I felt like it was set up for Blackbeard to kill him before Luffy even had the chance to fight him. Now I'm not so sure about that anymore. Now I'm not so sure what the end of series matchups are going to be, because most people didn't think Kid would be fighting Shanks, and nobody thought the Law would be fighting Blackbeard, but we got those matchups. So then when you think about Luffy versus Shanks and Luffy versus Blackbeard, which comes first? And is one of them just not going to happen? Because Luffy himself says he wants to save Shanks for last. So you can assume that this means he has the most respect for Shanks, but also he thinks that Shanks is the strongest emperor. And although I may have not thought so before, now I think that's the case. One thing that's up in the air is whether Blackbeard needs a third fruit or he still needs to grow in power. But what we have right now, I think undoubtedly Shanks is stronger than Blackbeard. And on top of that, I think Shanks, for the entire post time skip, has been the strongest emperor. So despite what feels like it should be the narrative setup with the Blackbeard being last, I'm not going to assume that's the case because Oda never went out of his way to say that Blackbeard is Luffy's final pirate fight. So I'm not going to use that against Shanks. Anything can happen. But going off of what we've seen and comparing these two and their abilities, just look at Shanks having future sight, his Conqueror's coded attacks, one-shotting a 3 billion berry pirate. There's just way too much for me to ignore when it comes to Shanks at this point. And I think there's more contrast in Blackbeard's ability and Shanks' ability so far. Number one is the decision making. Blackbeard went into the battle against Law without a proper plan, and that was almost to his detriment. He had the element of surprise on his side, but that was not to his advantage fully. Because you look at the other side, Kid had the element of surprise on Shanks, but Shanks is the one who dominated him. Because Shanks not only had thorough and good decision making, he also has abilities like future sight and insane speed that allowed him to corner Kid and just obliterate him. Which goes to show the battle is not just physical power and how hard you punch. There's a lot of technical aspects to it that allow us to determine who is stronger than who and who is the strongest in the series, or who might be the strongest in the series, I should say. So like I've been saying, Shanks has too many positive attributes to the point that the missing arm, although it might mean something, it may not mean as much as I or some other people may have thought. One thing I don't see too many people talking about is his insane speed. And the thing is, you look at Film Red, for example, look at how fast he moves on Kizaru and how he had Kizaru just flustered. And although this isn't canon, I do think that it might still be an accurate representation of how fast Shanks is, because we've seen a few hints in the manga that show that he has insane closing and movement speed. At a certain point, I wasn't ready to accept that anybody in the series actually would be faster than Kizaru. I always said that, you know, Kizaru is simply the fastest in the series because of his fruit, but other people might have better reaction speed. Now I'm not so sure about even that anymore. I feel like with what we know about Haki and what we might not know, complete mastery of the 3 Hakis can improve somebody's speed to a completely different stratosphere. So the way I see it now, it's like somebody could be faster than Kizaru or as fast as Kizaru through Haki and other attributes, but having Kizaru's fruit will be a sort of shortcut to that. But that doesn't downplay Kizaru's fruit. It just means that people with Haki can do what he does and maybe even better. Because again, Haki transcends all. Haki's potential is just that insane. A good example of this is the fact that in the early stages of the rooftop battle, Luffy was getting blitzed by Kaido, base Kaido mind you, even while he was using Future Sight. And then later on, he was keeping up with Hybrid Kaido. So over the course of those few hours, his speed has improved tremendously. So now just imagine Shanks. Imagine what Shanks has improved over the years in terms of speed, even endurance. You know, in the early portions of the raid, Luffy was getting two-shotted by attacks, and then those same attacks he was taking and kept fighting with no issue whatsoever. But let's get to the main point. How strong do I think Shanks is? Currently, I think Shanks is stronger than Prime Goldie Roger, and I would have never said this before because of all the things I mentioned already, thinking that Shanks didn't need to be that strong for various reasons. And even bigger than those reasons is the fact that Gold Roger and the old generation are held to this standard, or they're placed on this pedestal that no one in the current age can touch them other than Luffy at the end of the series. And you have to ask yourself, why? Why is this the case? And of course, Oda hasn't gone out of his way to say anything like Blackbeard is stronger than Whitebeard, Shanks is stronger than Roger, you know, Akainu is stronger than Garp, or anything like that. Some things you just have to piece together on your own. And I feel like there is no narrative benefit for the old generation to just be on his pedestal. I feel like it's even weird for the old generation, or like, let's say Roger is at a 10, Shanks comes down to an 8, and then Luffy just skyrockets up to 11. Like, why does it have to be up, down, up? Why can't it be the old generation is strong, the new generation is stronger, the newest generation is even stronger than that? That's what makes the most sense to me right now. I feel like that's part of the reason why Oda has Shanks use Divine Departure, to kind of say, Shanks is this generation's Goldie Roger, to kind of drive that point home. Because think about it, the best Haki feats that we will ever see in the series most likely will be from Shanks and other high tier Haki users in the current age. I mean, you just look at Shanks' Divine Departure, Roger's didn't look anywhere near as good as that one. I mean, even the fact that Kid's crewmates were fainting from this attack was just, I feel like, representative of how much was behind this attack. At the end of One Piece, all we're gonna have is the fact that Roger was a Pirate King. I think the fact that Roger split the sky with Whitebeard, I think that's the only Haki feat that we'll have from him. I don't think he'll show anything better than Shanks versus Green Bull, or anything else we'll see from Shanks down the road. So that's why I don't think there's any reason to keep holding Roger to this certain standard that no one can surpass him other than Luffy. I think the case can be made for a few people to have already surpassed him. And I'm feeling more and more confident about that as the arcs and the story wears on. I'm not saying it's a definitive fact because, like I said before, anything can happen, but I still feel there is plenty of reason to think this way. So in the current timeline, you asked me where I think Shanks stands. I think Shanks is as high as top 2 in the series, or top 3 rather. You can definitely make your guess on who I have over him, but that's all I have to say on Shanks. But tell me what you think. Do you think Shanks is the strongest character of all time? Do you think he's the strongest in the story today? Give me all your thoughts down below, but also don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell for more videos like this.